Welcome back to the Lore and Valor podcast. I am joined again today by my friend and writer, actor, director of independent films, Sam Platizky. Say hi, Sam.
Hello, Sam.
And another friend of mine, a fellow author. We've been in quite a few short story anthologies together. Mike Massa is an author of science fiction and has a wide variety of experiences in the security realm, the research realm, the financial realm, and most germane to note for today's topic is a veteran of the Naval Special Warfare community, more commonly known as the Navy SEALs. Thanks for joining us today, Mike. All right, cool.
Glad to be here.
In our community, I should note that we've developed the code name for Mike and his fellow SEALs is guys with great hair. He's wearing his hat today, but trust me, his locks are luscious. So anyway, The Terminalist, episode 1. Warning ahead of time, we're going to go episode by episode on The Terminalist. There will be spoilers for episode 1. So if you're watching this, most of you have probably watched the show, but if you haven't, I think all three of us would heartily recommend you go watch episode 1, then come back and join us to chat about the episode itself, because we will spoil the first episode. We will try to avoid spoilers for later episodes in the series, because we'll be doing their own videos for each of the episodes in sequence. But yeah, make sure you know the story.
We're going to spoil the hell out of episode 1, right?
Yep. So spoilers are on for episode 1. So
yeah, I'm only 3 in so far, so
yeah, that's good. We'll try not to spoil the series for you.
Yeah.
It's a shame when it actually turns out that Reese is trans and has been a woman the whole time. I'm kidding.
He's actually a guardian of the galaxy.
He's actually Star-Lord. I mean, let's talk about that. Maybe that's a good preamble, Sam. Thank you for giving me that.
You're welcome.
So this show is probably not going to be for everyone, right? Like, it's very violent. It's military focused. You know, if those aren't your bags of tea, then you're probably not going to want to bother sitting down for it. But all of the criticism I've seen in reviews, because I've read some negative reviews, revolves around why Star-Lord no make funny joke. That's the first criticism. Oh my God, there are so many American flags. It's so patriotic and jingoistic. Again, what did you think you were getting?
Oh, by the way, I'm not going to be a spoiler, but that gets turned on its head later towards the end.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, not spoiling anything for Sam or our audience, but this show really, pretty in-depth peek into what's wrong with the military hierarchy.
Yeah.
In many ways, like it has some characters in uniform who are not great people. I don't think that's a spoiler.
No, I don't think so.
But anyway, so we open up and I have it queued up if we want to watch it, but Mike, I want you to go ahead and lead off and let's, so the show opens up and it opens up. The first thing we see is the voiceover over the ocean with him quoting from the Book of Judges. And the Lord said unto Gideon, 9 people are still too many. It's not the exact quote, but it's from that passage, which since we're dealing with a Catholic, a Protestant, and a Jewish fellow, that actually is scripture for all of us. So I like the voiceover. That is one of the passages most often cited in the military. About the selection process, that it's like 9 people are still too many, anyone who doesn't have their eyes on the horizon, let them depart from us. So I don't mind the voiceover. I thought that was pretty good. Chris Pratt read it well. But then we get into the first operation. I'll go ahead and I'll talk a little bit first. So I do have combat time in Iraq and I have staff time in Afghanistan. It was a combat tour, but I didn't really do any of the fighting because I was busy doing PowerPoint slides. But in Iraq, the kind of combat I did was I never hit a tunnel system. We generally weren't inserted by helicopter. We were kind of like very well armed and armored beat cops in Baghdad was what most of my combat experience was like. Only the local criminal insurgent element had IEDs and shit. So we get into this mission right off the bat, and I'm so glad to have you on board, Mike, because this is the kind of stuff you guys specialized in. And while I think it looks pretty good, I didn't notice anything terribly stupid. They're trying not to mask each other. They're trying not to flag each other. There's good stuff there. They're not using white light with their nods down at first. There's good stuff there, but I'm going to let you start. I'm going to let you dive in at this point. And from a technical perspective, and then a story perspective, how did this hit you? How did you start out coming into the story?
let's back up just a moment, because you began at the opening where there's the words floating over the ocean, and it's the reference, the biblical reference, which is actually really important in the longer speak of the show, because they talk about how you pick the people that are going to be with you. And throughout the course of the episodes, not giving anything away, there are frequent visual references to training. So they show both flashbacks and current day to the episode that you happen to be on. There's SEAL training happening in the background. And my background that you touched on my active duty time, one of the tours I did was as a phase officer. So I ran first phase and fourth phase, which includes the much ballyhooed and much misunderstood Hell Week. I did a fair amount of time in financial services on Wall Street, so I understand how to run a book. I know what a cap table is, which is important later on.
Yeah.
I was a federal contractor, both as the guy whose time was being sold hourly, as well as working with congressional staff to build a budget and do a markup for the House Armed Services Committee or the HAC, never for the Senate. And now I work in the research world, as well as my gig in writing science fiction and fantasy. So I approach this as can they tell this story in a way that is entertainment? And I knew going in, for both valid reasons, like you don't want to give away things that are sensitive, as well as you can really bury a story by insisting that you make everything exactly the way it would be for real, especially in the term of using sort of military speak. And they don't do too much of that. They do a fair amount. They get the leavening in there. But before they go on the op, Justin, don't they actually spend time talking about like their mission preparation, and they're all on the table, they're all chatting back and forth about what's the mission going to be?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're correct about that. You're correct about that.
My comment on that is the world's shortest Frago and platoon leaders order I have ever seen in my life. And I know it's a damn lie because they never show PowerPoint, which, for better or for worse, is lingua franca for the planning process. I think it's a terrible thing, but that's the reality.
Yeah,
also,
no, from the conventional side. From the conventional side of warfare, that's the same all over. You know, you're doing a con op, a PowerPoint con op that's probably 30 to 40 to 50 slides deep for any intentional mission. You know, like for anything, you're going to hit a target, and that's just for, I only went after low level guys that didn't warrant the attention of someone like Mike. You know, like me and my guys would go take out low level high value targets. I know that the military speak ends up being paradoxical by nature. But those are the kind of missions that we would run. And even for us doing, relatively low risk ops compared to inserting into a non-permissive environment without a bunch of US troops around us, it was still, there's no way it'd be a brief discussion. The intel seems good, boss. Okay, let's go. Like that's not, you're right. That's not what it's like. But to your point, how far do you go down that rabbit hole before someone's bored and loses their interest? Yeah.
So they made the briefing serve the story by explaining enough about what was going to happen, so that when they actually go across the beach and begin their infill, the audience understands what they're looking at, sort of. So it serves the film, but they lead a whole host of activities that occur that, thank God there aren't any, but if there were staff officer fanboys, they would take a shit all over that sequence. And I'm not going to spend too much time on like the gear, because they largely get the gear right. They did their Call of Duty research, they did their Battlefield 4 research. It looks about right. They got the panos and the skid lids and the different forgery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They got that. I like how they used a mini plasma cutter to get through the obstruction of the tunnel entrance. Of course, what they don't show is that if you're doing that kind of entry and you're in dark conditions, you would actually, there's a way to shield the cutting area so that you don't throw off a lot of light and make reflections. So they don't truly show that, but whatever. And
you'd probably want to avoid washing out everyone else's night vision as well while you're cutting through that. Yeah.
But they don't, and that's one of those details that they don't, actually that would have been a significant part of the brief for the beginning of the infiltration phase of the op.
Yeah.
That would be a huge deal.
Yeah.
But of course, the brief is completely just condensed down to almost nothing.
Yeah, it's the Death Star run brief, you know, like from either Star Wars or Return of the Jedi. They're not really trying to show you proper MDMP, which MDMP is the military decision making process for Sam and our viewers. Like there is or actually at that level, I mean, I don't know if you even use this terminology in the SEALs, Mike. Maybe you don't, but like at the low level, it's TLP, troop leading procedures, and then once you get to battalion or higher, it's MDMP, military decision making process, and it's a step action drill. You know, it's you have a checklist of everything you're supposed to consider. And a lot of people hate it, but, you know, going through it might save you from forgetting something important. So
2.5 decades of being in SOCOM, the frogs have taken on an Army flavor, and some of the Navy stuff has leaked over into Army soft of all flavors. The Marines remain highly resistant, but of course they're late to the party and being part of SOCOM.
They are the troubled middle child of the military too. So, and just real quick, guys, SOF, SOF, Special Operations Forces.
Sorry.
No, it's okay, Mike. You go ahead and do you, and I will break in and translate as necessary. No worries. No worries.
And I will appreciate it.
Do you think that the very abbreviated pre-mission briefing sequence, of which there's kind of like 2 parts to it, was that adequate to explain and set up what came next?
For me?
As a filmmaker, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't want to get it's not like, I mean, I would compare it mostly to a heist film. You know, you don't want to give every beat of the heist because you're going to show the heist, you know? So if we're going to see the action that's going to happen, I don't need to see that much. And I don't know that that's what I'm missing from real life. So I don't miss that. But we also got character stuff too, with the guy who is exhausted. And that comes in like later in the thing. So like that was good. Some good character stuff and the relationship and camaraderie there. But you know, I don't miss anything. I felt like I went into it. I didn't even think about, you know, like something's missing here. It didn't even crossed my mind.
There were some pretty epically. It made sense because at their end of their deployment, so the really big bushy beards and casual attitude is actually about right for a platoon that's getting ready to rotate back. Because you're pretty much like, what are they going to do to me? Deploy me? You kind of have that opinion.
Yeah.
So they get to the end, the tunnel, and the first thing they do that was the first big thing that yanked me out of believability, and maybe SOP has changed in the last decade, but they leave a security element when comms are down. So he splits his force when his comms are already kind of iffy, and puts them at the tunnel mouth. And I can't think of a reason for why you would do that outweighs the negatives. And I don't think it really sets up anything important for the action that happens thereafter. I don't think that was an indispensable thing. So I question that both in terms of tactics and in terms of storytelling. Because if that had been a critical plot point, yeah, okay, wave the tactics around, I don't care. But it didn't really serve anything other than just being a thing. And I'm happy to have you guys disagree.
So I'm gonna punt on the tactical side because again I've never hit a tunnel system, so I don't have a frame of reference for it. I tend to agree with you that if you're down to, so when comms are down, obviously that should be pretty intuitive what that means, but I don't have radio contact, so the only way I'm communicating is if someone can see me do shit like that, or if someone can hear me flap my Mark I gums. Then yeah, I want everyone where I can see them, and then they can hear me flap my Mark I gums. You know, like that I can, you know, like they don't necessarily. There has to be a chain of people within voice distance to actually keep control of your unit. Which an officer, that is your proper place. Is not necessarily I'm first man in the stack. It's I'm in the best place to command and control my unit, and that means I neither take an unnecessary risk, nor do I keep myself back from risk. I'm where it's appropriate to be on the battlefield. So yeah, I can't really see a reason why you'd leave 2 guys by the door either if you can't talk to them. I agree with that. I will say I'm interested in what Sam has to say. Did you even notice, because this is something I'm interested in your answer. I'm not going to try to wait it. Did you even notice that they'd left 2 people at the entrance? Was that something that had registered to you while you were watching the scene?
I mean, it registered, and like, I guess because you needed them there for like,
Yeah.
you know, for later, but it didn't, that wouldn't occur to me to like think, it's like, wait, that's not what you do. That's not what you do.
Well, yeah,
when
like I don't expect you to be a tactician.
Yeah. We've had that conversation with other movies and TV shows and books and stuff. It's like, you know, you like focus on the tactics, you're like, they wouldn't do that. And I'm like, I don't know. You know, it works for me. You know, I don't need that. I don't need that much. I just need, like, I guess they did something crazy, it wouldn't really register with me.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that yanked me out a little bit of believability is that was the world's cleanest and best lit sewage system tunnel I have ever seen in my life. I spent an entire day cycle. We had to, on an op we didn't get to where we needed to be. We were delayed by some stuff. And so before we got to our planned layup point, we had to find one. And all we could find was a Jordanian sewer that had about 18 inches of headroom at the top of it. So we spent all day in sewage waiting for nightfall. And it happened because the junior officer that was working for me had made an error as we crossed the beach. So we were delayed getting, so I spent 9 hours listening to SEALs making death threats against this hapless lieutenant junior grade. Because as you know, when you get sewage in your, I mean, you get like infection going in your cuts, you can feel the tingle and the itch and then the burn, and you know what's happening. And at the moment you operate anywhere in the field, you get scratches and abrasions and nicks and cuts and stuff. And it's just, it was very unpleasant, and it was not well lit. So again, would that have served the story? Probably not. But I'm like, dude, I wish my sewer looked like that. That would have been like a cool drink of water. Yeah.
Cards on the table, Mike. I'm actually a pretty big fan of Jack Carr's. I've actually listened to his books, and I like them. You can nitpick them just like you can the show a little bit, but obviously, since he is an experienced SEAL, and from what I understand, has a very good reputation in the community.
No argument about that. No argument about Jack.
Yeah. So, but what I was about to say was, like, while I'm a big fan of Jack Carr's, I do listen to his podcast, and he actually addressed that point directly about the lighting in the sewer, because he was like, listen, he's like, no, it's terribly inaccurate. Like, that's not what it would look like at all. Oh, okay. But otherwise, all you're going to get, Sam, is muzzle flashes and dialogue. Maybe you're going to see, like, in a real sewage system, you're not going to see shit, you know, really, unless you got nods on. So that wasn't a great way to film it.
The amount, because exactly for that reason, because your vision is poor, and the moment you begin shooting, even if you have active hearing pro in, you lose an element of that. And so that actually affects how you deploy, because you end up being almost like a dive pair where you're maintaining physical contact so you know where your friends are in 3D space so you don't shoot them.
Yeah.
So,
well, even in
again, would that have served the story? It's arguable. Certainly the atmospherics to the uninitiated, that looks legit enough, so let's roll with that. Also, that was some absurdly clear, see-through, transparent sewer water, and there were no solids. There were no solids, there were no sanitary products. It was all just kind of murky green pond water, which is not what it looked like at all.
You know, as a filmmaker, I can get, like, you know, watching it, it's like, you know, it would be darker in real life, but as somebody who's filmed at night, like in the woods, you know, you just gotta hope people suspend their disbelief long enough, because you're fucked. You're fucked. Otherwise, it would just be like pitch black, and you're fucked. Just like a little bit of moonlight.
Yeah, I was about to say I was in. I got to West Point in the days before there were enough nods for trainees to all have nods when they went out into the woods. So we had to go mark one eyeball at night through heavy vegetation, and if there was no and if there was, again, this is out in the world, we're not in a tunnel, but if there was low illumination that night, you were down to hands on the strap of the guy in front of you to make sure that you're not losing people off into the woods to be eaten by bears or killed by insurgents. But yeah, no, that's completely legit. But like I said, it must have bothered him on some level, because Carr addressed that specifically. He was like, no way it would look like that, but it would be boring as shit and confusing to try to shoot it realistically. And Mike and I Mike especially, because like I said, he's got the expertise. Mike and I throughout this podcast are going to talk about things that are incorrect. It's more about the education factor of it, of like, hey, just so you know, this is how it's actually done. It's not necessarily a criticism of the story when we point out something like that.
No.
Yeah.
So they got the teamwork right. They got a lot of the communications, the sort of interpersonal comms and updating right. The movement wasn't horrible. There was an overemphasis on showing quick, snappy weapons handling as they went around obstacles and corners. And they show people going around corners by themselves, trying to cover multiple threat vectors. And in whenever you can, if you have to enter a space where there's multiple threat vectors and you can't cover them all by yourself because you only have 2 eyes, 1 muzzle, you usually do a multiple man entry, and your weapons are already trained in the anticipated direction of threat. So you may go around a corner as a hedgehog with 2 or 3 people pieing in all directions so that they can pick up the threat right away. So that kind of movement actually requires a degree of physical rehearsal, kind of like dance practice.
Yeah.
And if they had modeled what the footing was like in a sewer where you've got like a fairly hard, sticky, like slick clay level, and then anywhere from a couple inches, if you're lucky, to a couple of feet of thickening pudding, and then a layer of liquid on top of that. It's kind of like a layered cocktail, right? Solids to Jello to the part you slurp down first, and then with the things floating on top, so you can't see what you're walking on, and the footing is really uncertain. But obviously they showed things a lot easier than they are, and that's fine. But the next break point for me was the dog alerts, and they begin looking for the tripwire. If you were doing a clandestine infill, and the bad guys have set up an explosives pattern, and you discover it before it initiates, you immediately leave, like right then. You don't push.
Yeah.
And I think that's sufficiently universal that an audience member who wasn't tutored in entry tactics might go, "Why are they still going?" I know. What do you think, Sam?
No, but only because I'm like, it's like, well, they clearly have to go for the story to continue. That's it,
So the show can happen.
Yeah, exactly. Barely an inconvenience. But I mean, that didn't bother me. I was just like, oh, cool, they caught it in time, and then it didn't matter in the end.
Yeah, that one got me a little bit too, Mike. I was, because again, no sewer systems, but if we went into a house and had evidence, if we start entering a house and we have evidence that it's rigged, we're out. We're fucking out. There's nothing there worth getting a platoon killed.
And also the det cord looked bright new, and they had M134 blocks, which is American gear. I'm like, what?
Well, I'm going to defend, like, there's a lot of people in the world now with American gear. Like, I mean, that even the bad guys, we left a lot of shit in Afghanistan, and those people play ball with each other.
Okay.
So while it strains credulity a little bit, like it is unlikely that they would have nice new Semtex and, det cord that look like it came out of the package. It's not, I'm going to say it's not impossible that they would have that. Like, but yeah, I mean, it's unlikely.
So not so much that it's unlikely, but it would be a visual. It would, if I were an entry team and I see that the gear that it's rigged as an IED, like as a kill zone, and it's American gear and it's brand new, those are all enough sufficient incongruities that I would immediately call everybody out the way you came, exactly the way you don't change your path. We all go now, leave now fast, as opposed to thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
So. So so I guess we're looking at this through his memory, and that's gonna be the next thing I'm gonna touch on, because the next thing that happens is there's a big explosion, right? And bad things begin happening, and that scene had to happen a certain way to accomplish the motivation for the main character, which is central to the remainder of the show. So I don't think it's gonna be. We said this was a spoiler episode, right? We're gonna spoil episode 1, right?
Yeah, episode 1.
Pretty much all the good guys plus Bowser eat it. Right, they all die.
Yeah,
sort of like reminiscent of the way all the SEALs die in The Rock with Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, best on that movie is later on when the Marines are kind of going over how they feel about being bad guys. Killing a bunch of Navy SEALs is one thing, but women and children.
Yeah,
I started the whole movie, man.
Yeah, that was kind of kind of hilarious. And yeah, the standoff between Michael Biehn and Ed Harris in that scene in the shower room was fantastic and so much bullshit. I love it at the same time. Like, I both love it and it's horseshit at the same time. Like,
so he starts quoting the oath of the commission.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that's a novelty when you're all over looking over gun sites.
Yeah, no, that was funny. But of course,
it's about the same, and they wipe out a SEAL platoon, which is harder than it sounds, but historically it's happened 3 times. That's actually happened in real life.
Yeah. Well, and in places you wouldn't suspect, right? Because I'm thinking of Grenada. Was it Grenada or Panama? Was one of them?
So one each in Grenada, Panama, and OEF.
Yeah.
Actually, twice in OEF. So 4 times it's happened. You've lost the SEAL platoon.
Well, and this just another little peek into the books. In the books, they were written obviously a few years back, and this operation was not a Syrian operation. It was inspired by one of those incidents in Afghanistan. So it was much more true to what happened than kind of this invented mission, which is where I think some of the creative liberties with tactics, techniques, and procedures slip in because they had to do a new mission. The creative team, I think, wanted to keep it more up to date, since obviously we do still occasionally slip into Syria and kill or capture bad people, whereas we're done with Afghanistan. So like having it set in Afghanistan would date the show firmly as prior to 2021.
Right.
Whereas, having it in Syria means there's a few more years where this could have happened, kind of thing.
I also argue that a lot of people, I'd say hell, a lot, almost everyone doesn't really understand what our role in Syria is and what the extent of our operations are there. And that, whereas there's a lot more both journalistic and military understanding of what was happening in Afghanistan. So it's pleasantly and conveniently muddled for a storyteller. So that part I've got no beef with. So anyhow, there's a very confused gunfight. The guys at the entrance get gobbled up. The bad guys are now in the tunnel complex, wandering around in the shit. Part of the question I have is that the bad guys, and it becomes clear that the bad guys knew that the SEALs were coming. It is astonishing that anybody lives through that. Yeah. At all. Period. Dot. And if you're in a narrow tunnel made of reinforced concrete and a big charge goes off, you're not living through it if you're within a certain amount of meters. You're not even, and the key thing for the story is the main character suffers a profound concussion, TBI. He really gets his clot clean, which is legitimate, but he appears to be, other than a very manly cut over one eye, entirely untouched. Yeah. That's, again, necessary for the story, but really unlikely.
Yeah, I try not to just drop this in every conversation, but I've survived an IED blast. I was not pretty for a long time afterwards. I'm stunning now. But no, I didn't grow the beard to hide it, but if I don't have a beard, you can see even now like a bunch of scar work down this side of my face from the IED blast. And I was, like I was hurt, but relatively lucky. And like I was lucky not to be, Two-Face from Batman, really, is the bottom line. So you're correct. And that will be a theme going throughout the show, not really a spoiler. As per most Hollywood productions, they tend to back off in many instances, not all instances, how fucked up someone can look from a blast,
Well, like, and the main character, as the episodes go on, will sustain additional injuries, and his recuperation and regeneration rate is phenomenal. Like, I wish I could be like that.
Mike, don't lie to me. I know you all have Weapon X healing factors. Like, I know you do. Like, yeah, I can chop your pinky off and it'll grow back by the next time we're at a convention together. I know how this works.
The bone frog tattoo, the nano ink actually disperses into the structure and promotes healing very rapidly.
Yeah,
like the Halo shield bar, your health bar goes, and you can go again.
I thought we weren't getting into confidential stuff. This feels confidential to me.
How else can you explain that beautiful long hair? When you're way past that should occur.
When everyone else in theater besides the special operations guys has a high and tight and no beard, it must be magic.
So the the mission from the perspective of the narrator and the viewpoint ends there.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of stuff that in real life, because they get him out, they don't even talk about how the extract goes. They don't talk about the QRF, the quick reaction force. They don't.
You're talking about in the mission briefing, they don't talk about it except for to say there are Rangers on QRF 10 minutes out, and then they don't give any other details. Yeah.
Which is a really long QRF wait, by the way, for a planned operation.
Yeah. To quote Top Gun, bullshit, this will be over in 2. You know?
Yeah. Going supersonic. I'll be there in 30 seconds.
The Blackhawks are going supersonic. No, I remember. We do not have a helicopter that can exceed Mach.
Yeah.
Sure you don't.
Cue the Airwolf theme song, right?
Nice.
No, black helicopter going to be coming to my house.
Yeah, sorry, Sam. You know too much now.
Apparently.
But anyhow, so they go over, they skip a whole bunch of important things that be relevant and be interesting. Again, serving the story because they want to focus on, okay, they now established he's lost something, and they want to focus on the impact to him. And they get that right. When he's looking at the 12 remains cases in the hangar, I mean, I'm surprised he's upright and standing on his feet after his injuries and his TBI and his emotional state. But that they capture some of that gut punch really, really, really well, because I won't dwell on it too long, but there is a profoundly tight, familial type connection within a well-functioning SEAL platoon that's been together for a long time. So the guys in that SEAL platoon would have been living butt to nut, cheek to jowl, and involved in each other's personal lives for probably 20 to 24 months at that point. And not all SEAL platoons have super tight, homogenous relationships, but I would say that most do. You know, there's obviously examples that have been in the news in the last 48 months, 60 months where that was clearly not the case. But by and large, yes, that tight bond is there. And especially if you're the guy in charge, it'd be like having your limbs amputated. It would be devastating to a point, especially since he lived, so the survivor guilt would be absurdly strong. He would genuinely be at risk for killing himself. I mean, no question about it.
Yeah.
And that actually becomes important, because the next thing that happens is he flies back with his surviving platoon mate on the airplane. Except now you begin to introduce the ideas, all right, what's happened to his memory? And this is the freaky part, because, and I think this is the part that all humans can relate to. You are your brain. You are your memory. And if you're this, super alpha, super strong, go fast, go everywhere, do everything kind of guy, and your brain stops working right, that's a pretty profound change that you're going to want to deny for as long as you possibly can. The amount of denial they show the character going through, and he resolves it pretty rapidly, fairly rapidly, is kind of surprising. I think denial would last a lot longer than a few weeks. I don't know. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's a thing with this series. Can you hear me okay?
I'm getting some echo off you, Sam.
Let me say something.
Okay, that didn't echo though.
Gotcha now.
All right, good. So there's a thing with this series where, like, the first episode especially, and I told Justin when I saw it, I was like, it was good. I don't know what's going on, but it was good. Where, like, you gotta get to the meat. You gotta get to the meat, because it's the pilot too, so you want to get to that point. So I feel like, we could have sat with him and the guilt, and I feel like that's inherent in, like, what would happen. It would have to for like that. But I feel like you also got to get to the point of the story, which they do, or they get closer to it in the pilot, because you need to hook your audience. Otherwise, you could lose them by episode 2. So
yeah, I will point out, like, I never lost a unit, thank God. But I have lost men in combat. And I will say that in a sense, it's okay that they transition through it in the story, because those of us who are there know it's never going away. You keep living your normal life, you keep functioning, you keep, well, in his case, you don't live your normal life, you live a quest for revenge, but the rest of us come home, and the rest
How
of
is
us
that not normal? That's perfectly normal.
Yeah.
Quite sincerely, that's the part that made the story, sorry to cut you off, that made, that's when I began to click, because, you know, I never lost anybody in combat, or for that matter, fatality in training. But that, my thirst, my hunger to hold the beating heart of the person responsible in my hand, just thinking about it, I keep on, my blood pressure's rising. Because those are, I mean, they're not my kids, but they get the brother thing pretty spot on. If you've got a tight platoon, those are your brothers, and you're gonna want blood.
Yeah. Conventional military units and conventional Army combat units go through different processes than special operations forces, no question about it. But the platoon I took to war, the teams I took to war, you know, as a fire support officer the first time, you know, there are separations between officer and enlisted, you know, like there are, and they're there for a reason. I'm not saying they're not valid. And furthermore, I'll even say that, you know, most enlisted don't typically care that much for officers. But if you deploy with guys, so our deployments were 12 months, 12 to 15 months. And after that 12 months with the same unit, I knew things about those guys their wives and girlfriends probably wish I didn't, you know, and every last one of them mattered to me, you know, every last one of them, you know, like we weren't, it's, friends isn't the right word. It's, and family maybe isn't either, but it's the closest word we have to what happens in a combat unit. You know, like it's, we use the word family because it's the closest word in English that I can think of to what the feeling is, because it's not always about like, it's not even always about affection, but the bonds get very, very deep. And the losses hurt very, very much. In addition to that, talking about the fact that we know that Chris Pratt, in this episode, we start getting hints that he is now an unreliable narrator.
Yes.
You know, that his memory is shocked because of TBI and maybe other factors. And I will say that even without, so when I got hit, I did not suffer a TBI, but the stress of the event was enough. I know that's true because I am not a reliable narrator from my own experience in Iraq, and neither are the guys who were there on the ground who were not hit. No two of us remember that day the exact same way. Like no two of us remember the story exactly the same. None of us are lying. No one's self-aggrandizing. You know, no one's saying like, oh, well, you just forgot that I did this heroic deed. Like you just didn't see it. Like, but we just remember the order of events differently. You know, like the medic who worked on me remembers getting to me at a different point than one of the infantrymen who we both agree helped treat me and help get me patched up and onto the Black Hawk. Like the timelines do not sync up on how they remember that day. And again, no one's lying and nobody's actually suffering from TBI. They scanned my cat. I'm okay. You know,
do you think it's credible that he could have kept from getting more advanced medical treatment in theater? Could he have insisted on that?
See, and this is where I think I actually will defer maybe a little bit to you, Mike. I couldn't have done that, but we in the normal conventional world we know y'all do stuff that we couldn't do. I don't know how far that rolls. You know, like I don't know if that says you can tell a doctor to fuck off, I'm getting on a plane. You know, like I know that the special warfare community, the special operations community, for good reason, operates with looser oversight sometimes. I don't know if that translates to screw you, my head's fine, I'm going to get on the plane, even though you could drop dead if it's an undetected TBI. You know,
like a character there who didn't make sense why he was there, given where he was supposed to be assigned. But so there's an 05 Frogman there who, if this had been an actually realistically executed mission, would have been executed from the CJSOTF, which is the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force. which would have been somewhere in the Arabian Peninsula, more than likely. And that's where the initial debriefing would have taken place.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Did you hear all that, Sam?
No, my internet was crapping out.
Real quick recap, Sam. Do you remember the black Navy SEAL officer who's in the hospital at the same time as Reese with his doctor? Do you remember that guy? Mike's explaining like his role and what it would actually look like. Real quick, so go ahead.
Yeah, it's in order for him to have been there, he would have to have been at the Siege of Sodef, which is the Advanced Special Operations Task Force that would have been actually in theater. Quick aside, they show the whole mission being run from Coronado, which apart from a very few weeks, several weeks or a couple of months at the beginning of the GWAT, where there was in fact a
global war on terror.
Yeah, sorry. Post 9/11. Those operations would have been run from in theater from Special Operations Command, Central Command, SOC sent forward somewhere in the Middle East, not actually in Coronado. But they showed it happening in Coronado. That's important for the story. Not going to get into that now, but the Navy 05 there, had he said to the doctor, what he says goes, the doctor would have said, thrown his hands up in the air, and then lodged a protest and tried to escalate it before the airplane took off. So, yeah, they probably could have pulled it off. And yes, because he wanted to get back to where his guys were. But what's important is that he loses a couple days. And that serves the story because he gets back, and before he gets back, he's drinking in a bar with his friend, the only other survivor, and you learn that guy left earlier than he did. So it reinforces unreliable narrator, and that's really important for the first couple episodes, 3 episodes. Less important later. I think they should have kept it as an important plot point, because self-doubt is a terrifying thing to a person who has crafted their professional persona around being 100% right. I know what I know, and that's critical for making the right decisions. And after the first few episodes, that's not as present. They focus on other of his physiological realities at that point, and that's fine. But that actually resonated with me, because holy crap, not being able to rely on my memory and my perceptions would be truly terrifying, like legitimately scary. Like, holy shit, who do I trust? If I can't trust me, how do I trust any of you?
Yeah.
And they show some of in the first episode, they show some of the friction between him and his wife, right?
Yeah.
And her frustrations are both legitimately represented and and based in reality. And also, if anything, man, she had the patience of Job. I was surprised that she was as calm as she was. The team guy wives that I know that aren't like brand new wives that had been in the community for a while and dealt with their husband's bullshit for 5, 6, 10 years. They're not that calm all the time.
Well,
they're usually a lot angrier.
We do get a flashback later with her being a little more real with Reese. So it's not like she's not completely a Mary Sue, but yeah, I get what you're saying, Mike.
But that call he makes, where he says, "I'm okay, but everybody else is gone." Ooh. That'd be a tough call.
So, I keep referencing my personal experience because I did happen to have something a little similar, except for, again, I didn't lose a whole unit. There were 2 guys killed. On my first deployment to Iraq, the way it's supposed to work, and I think this is true of the Naval Special Warfare community as well, is you're not supposed to get a call telling you your husband's dead. Somebody shows up to tell you.
It's called a
notification team.
Casualty Assistance Coordination Officer, the CACO or the CACO. And there's a team of people that just show up.
Yeah. They don't call. They show up. Yeah. But to make sure you don't kill yourself right there, amongst other reasons, like this is the most critical time, Yeah. So casualty, I never did. In the Army, it's split into CNO and CAO, casualty notification and casualty assistance.
Yeah.
I never did notification, but I have done casualty assistance. But so the way it's supposed to work is an officer and a chaplain and another wife, if available, show up at your door and they tell you that your husband's gone,
Yeah,
or your wife is gone increasingly or in modern times. But on my first Iraq deployment, the unit fucked up and called every wife in the battalion and said, someone's been killed. We don't know who.
Jeez.
Whoa. Who did that?
Yeah.
Who did that? So who did that?
It got like, I never was able to trace it down to who did it because I would have nailed their fucking testicles to the wall for scaring my wife like that. But this was before I got hit. This was actually earlier on in the deployment. A guy got killed in an IED blast, not me, obviously. And I was nowhere near it. Like, it was in another part of the battalion, not me, not my company, not within the 100 dudes that I'm part of the organization of. It's in another sub-organization of the battalion. And they just fucking called every wife in the battalion and said, yeah, we don't know who, but somebody's been killed. And I'm like, you guys, does your family tree fork? What the fuck is wrong with you?
Jeez,
you know,
right.
like, you know how terrifying that is to everyone. And, you know, fortunately, you know, like my wife emailed me and I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, nothing's happened. This, you know, not so much as a paper cut.
There are much better controls now. I hope. I think there are.
It only happened once.
Around dissemination of that kind of info, but also there are rules about who has their cell phones and when and how they're maintained.
Yeah.
I had gotten out just before 9/11, relatively speaking, and I would say within about 2 weeks or 3 weeks, middle of the night, I get a phone call from the wife of one of my guys that I'd last had, and she wanted to know what happened to Dave. Where's Dave? What do you know about Dave? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she had grabbed the last platoon contact list she had, and was calling me to find out what had happened to a buddy of mine, Dave Tapper, who had gotten killed. He was one of the first SEALs to die. He was a contractor working for another government organization, and they had an even worse like notification mechanism and were way behind the times. So she called me. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, but the wife network is so tied in. She had gotten the word that someone had gotten killed, and she called me to find. I'm like, I'm a civilian, man. I deal with spreadsheets now. I have no idea. I'll call around and I'll find out what I can find out. So I became one of the people that was unhelpfully demon dialing. Hey, what do you know? And which probably wasn't helpful, but you're trying to find out for someone who's losing her mind.
Yeah.
And I knew her from when we were working together, when Dave and I worked together. So
yeah,
it's a real thing. I can't imagine. I mean, if you got, well, I actually can't imagine because it's happened a couple times. When you lose a large number of people, it affects not just the families, but the whole squadron or team and group are just roiled. The amount of international cell phone minutes you burn up is insane. Trying to manage that because you want to know who, and then you want to know why, and then you want to know what. And it's a very natural set of progressions. But in this story, they kind of they gloss over that, and they pretty much go straight to medical condition, debrief with an important character shows up, which is the SEAL admiral in charge of the operation. Again, he would have had nothing to do with it because it's a training and education command, not an operational command, but it serves the story. I'm not going to dwell on it. I don't think the average civilian would understand the difference anyhow. And so over to Sam.
I'll go ahead and summarize, Mike. I'll break in for a second and summarize real quick. So the military basically breaks down into, you know, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who you've probably seen on the news, and the chairmans of each branch, right? Army, Navy, Air Force. The commandant of the Marine Corps is now on there. He wasn't always in history. He used to just be repped by the Navy. And then they like advise the president and are responsible for the overall health of the force, but they don't give orders. Like they are not in the chain of command to combatant forces, you know? So you have commands that are like Mike said, training and education. They're in the States. They don't actually have authority over forces that are out there fighting wars. That is always under the purview of a combatant commander that is out there in the world, you know, wherever it is, whether it's CENTCOM, which is usually what you would think is what most of it is. It's in the Middle East, or EURCOM in Europe, or what have you. So you basically have like two different chains going down, where one is, I don't want to say just administrative, but one is not going to command the warfighters, and that admiral is not in one of those warfighter command billets based on what they say.
Training, education, provision of forces, plans, policy, and protocol, and some acquisition. And then the other side is all the guys that are actually fighting.
Yeah. Now people go back and forth. Yeah. Now, like, you're occupying a position in this bureaucracy, you will theoretically, at least in your career, go back and forth.
Yeah, you go back and forth, but you don't
like
continuously.
Yeah, clear as mud.
Well, it's important because another important character that shows up in the first episode is a person you realize is the Secretary of Defense.
Mm-hmm.
Why the SecDef is showing up as opposed to, say, Secretary of the Navy or Deputy Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict, you know, DDO Solik, isn't clear. But again, it's, he's radically more successful an author than I am. But I'm not going to criticize Jack on this other than to say, I think he didn't give his reading audience enough credit. Tom Clancy usually got this kind of stuff right. And his novel sold really well, and he was a very successful author. But that's the kind of thing that Clancy would have gotten, you know, would have nailed, or had a reason for why Sec Navy is there, right? He was really good at combining those two worlds.
Yeah.
And I haven't read the novel, so maybe in the book it's that way, and in the screenplay, which Sam can speak to, they mix them together for convenience. I don't know.
I don't know what they did. But it did feel a little bit weird that the Secretary of Defense would be there, you know, for this. But even though I don't know anything about it, it did feel a little bit weird.
It's a big jump.
Yeah.
When Extortion 17
for one mission.
When Extortion 17 went in, and we lost, I want to say it was either 15 or 17 SEALs out of 33 on that helicopter, SecDef didn't go down to, was it McGuire Air Force Base where they land? Or no, Dover. SecDef didn't go to Dover and meet the airplane.
Yeah.
Right. Didn't happen. You know who did was Sec Army.
Yeah. Sec
Army showed up in person, and that, which is interesting because the Sec Army's got a lot of stuff going on, and going from DC to Dover and back is not a trivial amount of travel time.
Yeah. So real quick, I want to break in. Like, so Sam, we're at the point, like, we've had the mission's over. Oh, I did want to do one technical thing since I'm a fire support guy. So they're only the Rangers come to rescue them on the beach, which just so y'all know, in Afghanistan and Iraq, the Rangers coming to pull a SEAL platoon out of contact is a meme. You know, it's a thing that occurred a bunch of times. They tend to rely on them when they need more people who can shoot. They rely on Rangers to come, but it's like, you know, the Navy SEAL teams are your fine china. You break them out for special occasions, but they're a small unit, and a few casualties makes that SEAL team inoperable in comparison to a battalion of 500 Rangers. You know, so when they get into that sort of situation, the Rangers would be their quick reaction force to come help them out and pull them off the beach. That's pretty realistic.
It's realistic insofar as you want a QRF. They said the QRF was 10 minutes out, which is kind of a long interval.
Yeah.
And often the QRF is composed of the platoon that be relieving them. So Alpha mentioned that Bravo's in theater and they can take the mission if they want to. Bravo platoon would have been in all the briefings, and they would have been part of the QRF, if not the QRF.
That makes sense too.
Also, they don't mention air. They don't mention supporting fire. None of that. That's back to planning, but they were keeping it simple because, as Sam said, they want to get to the meat. Yeah. What is the meat of the story? And I have to extend understanding that was the whole point.
Yeah, and so that their only aerial fire support is miniguns on a Blackhawk, which, as we all know, for like as you and I know, Mike, for this mission, they probably would have had the Thunder of God on call. You know, you probably would have had a B-1 orbiting with JDAMs. Now, that being said,
they would have pre-planned all the DIMPs
Oh, sorry. B1 is a, sorry, I did it too. B1 is a bomber that can carry up to 17 5,000-pound bombs that have GPS guidance packages on them. I know because I got to use one in Afghanistan on a platoon of insurgents, and it was amazing. And then, you know, so that's what I say when I mean that. Like a JDAM is a GPS guided bomb, is what it is. So that's that terminology. But we know they have all things in the world, and their gun chip support, if they were using helicopters, would probably be MH6 Little Birds, which are, you know, short little helicopters with rockets or miniguns mounted on the side. They wouldn't really rely on their Blackhawks. I mean, the Blackhawks do have MH60 Blackhawks, to the best of my knowledge, do have miniguns mounted on the sides, the little Gatling gun thing looking on there, but that's not they're there for transport, not so much the attack role.
You think they would use helicopters for that?
I don't, given where they are, I don't think they might have because of range issues. I think they probably would have used fixed wing assets. But if they were
range issues, the heels have to loiter outside the detection range on radar, right? And so their dash speed is like what, 140 knots. So they would have gone with something faster. I use the term DIMPY, designated mean point of impact. You pre-plan where you want your supporting fires to land. So it's all, everything's just, give me a battery 5 on DIMPY 444, and the battery's already got it laid in. They screw the tubes, they pull it, and away they go. And you can have fire on target in 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, maybe less.
Battery equals 6 to 8 artillery pieces. Just so you know, that's what I commanded for my last command in the Army. Now, anyway, I want to stop the technical stuff for a minute and say, okay, so we're in the story where, you know, he's home, he's coming home. Sam, how's this story hitting you at this point that we're past the tactical technical stuff? We're more into the human stuff. Like, how are you feeling about the story as he comes home, reunites with his wife, and you're getting into more of the human suffering, human drama of what he's going in? What are your thoughts at this point?
It's good at this point. I'm wondering where it's going, you know, at that point, because at that point there's no conspiracy. Spoiler alert, there's a conspiracy seeming thing happens later. But like at this point, it's just, you know, it's the human cost, which is, you know, it's a chunk of the story, and it's good. I thought it was well acted. I thought Chris Pratt did a really good job. I think a lot of people sell him short because he started out in comedic acting, but I think he had a solid grasp for the drama. I thought that the family situation was good, and then you still have like and the memory stuff starts coming up more. And I like Mike said, I thought that was going to be more of a recurring thing as the series went on. And I'm surprised that it seems to have slowed down, at least where I'm at. But you have the thing with like the bird that hits the window, and that comes back a bunch of times. But yeah, no, so at that point, you know, I'm liking it, but I'm wondering where it's gonna go, because at that point, you know, the mission got fucked. You know, he's got something going on with his memory, and but I'm wondering where it's gonna go at that point.
Yeah, I will say for me, the bird analogy pays off pretty well by the time we're done. Without saying spoilers, I think they pay that off pretty well as we get to the last episode, and I think they use it pretty well. Some people don't like it. Some people think it's a little too art house for a revenge tale, but I appreciated it. Mike, I don't know how you felt about that.
I enjoyed it because it provided a way to, because it shows up in more than one episode, and it presented in more than one way. It was a way, if anything, a little heavy-handed, to focus the viewer's attention on an important plot detail, which was deliberately not initially fully explained. So it gave you something to think about that was not action. So I thought it was all right. I was okay with it.
It's a proper example of abeyance, which is if you do it wrong, withholding information, you're just being a dishonest storyteller. If you do it right, then it does make the experience richer.
Yeah, so I was okay with it. And at that point in the story, it's a personal failing that I critique the actions of fictional commanders. Like, you asshole. You wouldn't even be in that position if you'd done your fucking job right, you dumbass.
Yeah.
Right. At the same time, all right, you screwed up. Things are pretty shitty. I already knew what was going to happen, But so I was kind of like going, it's going to get shittier. But,
Yeah.
But at that point, if he's at the position where he's going to go, I think he's already met the NCIS guy, who's actually, is he NCIS? Yeah, he's NCIS. And one thing they get right is the SEALs hate the fucking Navy cops, 100%, with a passion of 1,000 burning suns. Hate, hate, hate. I'm surprised he actually even talked to the guy without having counsel present. I certainly would not have.
Because service members have that right as well, to be clear. Like, it's like if you're under criminal investigation as a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine, you still have the right to counsel, that, like, just like anyone else. There's a lot of rights you lose being in the service, but that's not one of them. And
also, he lets him into his house.
Yeah.
I think which I would never in a million years have done. But again, that's just me. I didn't have my plot cleaned. I haven't experienced that loss. So I was surprised at how, I mean,
that was not in the book, to be clear. Okay. That scene was not in the book. Carr did not write that part.
But they get that right. It's clear that he, even before he has other reason, he views the NCIS guys as just the side of being worthy of contempt, and then later on full on contempt, and that's accurate. I can't stand NCIS. I brushed up against them when I was in active duty, and actions since then have only made me hate them more.
It was good. It was good casting, because like that guy was like, seems like a scumbag from the tip. I thought there was going to be like, it was like, oh, maybe he'll be actually like really like actually a good guy, and it's just like no.
Yeah,
he's a dick.
Yeah, well, and like I think we'll save it for episode 2. There's a scene in episode 2 where they kind of misdirect without being dishonest with him and the reporter. Who's a much bigger deal in the book. She's a main character in the series too, but in the book she's I think it was appropriate what they did with her. Okay, I'll go ahead and talk about this part now. In the book, Katie Buranek is the daughter of someone who escaped communist Czechoslovakia with the help of Reese's dad, who was not a vanilla SEAL. He was CIA augmentee. So he went from the SEALs.
That's nowhere in the TV show.
Nowhere in the TV show. So she's Eastern European, not Asian American. Well, she's American of Eastern European descent, not Asian American. And she is less of a, because in the series, her politics aren't that relevant, but she seems like much more of a pretty typical millennial internet age reporter. In the book, she's much more of a Laura Logan figure. If you guys know who I know you do, probably do, Mike, but Laura Logan is a rather attractive female reporter who tends to lean heavily conservative and be extremely pro-military. So she's kind of more inspired by that, and that she's way more friendly with Reese way earlier and is way more sympathetic to his cause and is less of a free agent and more of a support mechanism for him, which in terms of liking her as a military guy makes it a lot easier to like her than it is to like Katie in the show. I like Katie in the show just fine, but
she does okay, but they screwed up. The point you just brought up informed something that I caught as an incongruity that is actually might be one of the first unforced script errors that I've detected. In the TV show, later on, that character talks about how she feels strongly about her actions because she lost her father, because her father got her out of communist China.
Yeah.
And that her family is 100% ethnic Chinese, with the last name, a surname of Buranek, and she's unmarried, by the way. And they make that also plain. So that didn't compute. I remember thinking until she had that explanation, I thought, oh, it kind of makes sense because she could be a Tartar, she could be Azerbaijani with those features, she could be, there's lots of people with distant Asian heritage from Eastern Europe that kind of have those features. So it kind of would play. But then in the TV show part, they're very explicit. Mainland China.
Yeah.
With the name of Buranek.
My assumption is she's talking about her biological father and that they have adoptive Eastern European descended parents in America. That's my guess, but they don't say that. So that's the explanation you come with. But like I said, so I think like that change while I like personally the book Katie Beranek as a person better because she's super hua and loves the military and just wants to help Reese as best she can, I think it's better that she's more neutrally aligned towards him, and that allows for more dramatic tension between them throughout the series. You know, it's more interesting.
Early on, she's not a likable character to someone who has a military background.
She's another fucking reporter. Like, you know, like that's all she is.
Yeah, get out of my face.
Mm-hmm.
So I liked her character as part of the story. I did not like her character in episode 1 as someone I go have beers with.
Yep. Totally with you. And I think that's right. I think that was one of there's maybe 3 or 4 things they changed that I was like, yeah, no, like that was a good change from the book to the series.
The way that she meets Reese, where she walks in and said, knowing full well what's going on, she says, "Who are we drinking to tonight?" Oh man, you're lucky you didn't get a fistful of, you know, the chops.
Yeah. Fuck off, Katie. That's who I'm drinking to tonight. Fuck off. But yeah, like I think it was a better change to have her like that. Okay, so we covered that. So we're home. We go through the funerals. The SecDef shows up, which is very unusual. Not impossible, but unusual. It's just the quickest way to think of it is it's jumping 10 or 12 rungs in the chain, which TV shows have done forever. You know, like, I mean, like there's, you know, Captain Kirk goes on away missions. No, you know, but we want to see Captain Kirk on the away mission, so fuck it. You know, so SecDef shows up, and this is another one where she was much colder in the book. She's much more clearly in the book. She's much more a Hillary Clinton stand-in that she is. Whereas like in the show, they made her a much warmer, more compassionate, more caring personality, which that one I think is maybe for the better, but also is maybe it's almost naive, I think. And maybe this is just me being cynical, but I actually don't think people at that level very often have much of a conscience left by the time they're at that level of a cabinet secretary. Like, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I would have a discussion with Colin Powell or Jim Mattis, and I'd be like, no, really, they're a great guy. But like, I view all those people with a great degree of skepticism, and all I ask of them is competence, not humanity.
So I can't speak to Secretary Gates. I know a lot of folks thought very well of him. But I'm not saying he's
necessarily a villain. I just don't know that he would have been so maternal. But go ahead.
I have met and have been privileged to spend sort of informal hangout time with one of the recent Sec Armies, and he 100% retained his morals and ethics, sufficiently so that he kept a signed letter of resignation ready to go. Like, if he came up against it. I've seen people in those. I think your suspicion is well founded. There are exceptions. They are rare, and they typically don't last that long. So, but yeah, it's possible. I had to sort of accept the hand wavium, a la Captain Kirk on the away team style, and I accepted it because it served the story, but it definitely felt awkward. The thing that they didn't show at the funeral, they show Chris Pratt pulling off his trident and hammering it flush with a single strike into a mahogany casket.
Star-Lord's pretty jacked, Mike. I mean, come on, like.
So I have been to that's actually a fairly recent activity where people put their tridents on the casket. I've seen several like that, and often if it's a military funeral, the entire top of the casket is covered in tridents. You can't drive a trident into a casket flush with a single strike, and nobody tries. Because I mean, you can get it to stick, but that's about it.
Yeah.
There are photographs of some of the caskets that look like they've been enameled in brass or gold.
Wow.
I can try and find some and share them. So that is a thing that happens. It's a relatively recent and post 9/11 thing that gets done.
Yeah. Well, and it tends to pick up because you started taking more casualties. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? More funerals, more rituals emerge.
Yeah, I think there's been 200 SEALs, 190 SEALs KIA in the last 20 years, which was more by several factors than every from 1975 to roughly to 2000, relatively few dead SEALs in combat, and then it just asymptotically took off.
Yep, it's Sam all over.
With 2 or 3 notable spikes, really bloody days. So losing 12 dudes in a single operation would be seismic. That's a big deal. It'd be a big W for the bad guys. But so he's at this point, we're all on the same page. He's about to go for his medical appointment, right? That's the next thing that happens after the funeral.
Yeah,
and it's a really important plot point, because at that point you're thinking this guy's memory is he's not altogether present and correct.
Yeah.
Right. They make that.
We missed one little beat. I like when he puts his gun in Katie's face because she tailed him. That scene was pretty good. Yeah. I mean,
do we skip his friend's suicide or suicide?
His friend's apparent suicide.
Yeah. We didn't go over that, did we?
No, we missed that part. So yeah, that's really the introduction of the shitbag NCIS guy.
Yeah.
Holder. Is he meets him at the crime scene where Boozer allegedly shoots himself. He says is that the first time? Yeah, that's the first indicator I think you get that his timeline screwed up and his memory's wrong. Or no, the first one's in the interrogation because he forgot who tripped the tripwire to set off the IED that collapsed the tunnel.
Well, even before that, I think the reporter was like, "Who are you drinking with or something?" Because he was like the guy, and he looks out and the guy somebody's walking away. So you don't know if he's there or if he's just left or whatever that happened.
The hints get increasingly stronger. Yeah. Right. That was the first hint. The second hint is that the audio record is wrong compared to his memory. And when he asked,
they showed him on the airplane going to sleep with Boozer next to him and waking up by himself.
Yeah, and Boozer didn't wake him up. Oh, we tried to wake you up. No, there's no way that guy would have left his buddy on the plane and not woken him up and like, hey, bro, we're back in the land of the big PX.
Yeah, get your ass up, man.
Yeah. So that was maybe the biggest hint for anyone who, for most people who can think. And then next one's where he says no, your timeline's wrong. This guy shot himself 2 days ago. Yeah. You just got back yesterday. So I will say I buy that Reese is tipped off by the fact that he shot himself with the wrong gun. I've never considered suicide, but I probably would want to do it with my favorite weapon, I mean, it's maybe a stretch, but okay, it's not hard evidence.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be convincing unto itself. I'd much more rely on my analysis of his state of mind than I would he used the wrong pistol to shoot himself. But I get that they, in their storytelling, are trying to focus on an artifact and give you a solid point to hinge on. But
it's an adequate plot point. It is not unusual for SEALs to group purchase someone a weapon.
Yeah.
It's not unusual for the weapons to be decorated. That happens.
Barbecue guns.
But I don't think they get him a SIG 226. I know
Jack Carr is a big fan because he talks about it from time to time, and I think their issue, but I don't know.
No, I mean I think the proper nomenclature now is it called a Mark 25? Is that what the SIG is called? The 226?
I honestly don't know.
I 100% agree. I carried them. I've owned them. I like them because they reliably go bang, but and that's the most important quality of any gun. It has to go bang when it's supposed to. If it doesn't do that, it doesn't matter how cool it looks. But It is a very dated pistol design. You know, double action first trigger press is absurdly difficult to shoot accurately under stress, unless you practice. And even then, it's intrinsically not as easy to shoot as a modern striker-fired polymer frame pistol, whether it's a M17 or an M18 or one of the Glock, or pick one of the Wonder Guns, right?
Yeah.
But as a plot point, yes, they would gift a gun. Yes, it would be decorated. Yes, it's visually distinctive, and that serves the story, so I let it go.
Yeah.
More, I mean, not that most of the viewing public hasn't seen it. They got the blood spatter on the couch totally wrong. 100% wrong.
Yeah. I've never been to a site after someone blew their own head off. I would expect, like, if you put your gun in your mouth and pulled the trigger while you're sitting right in front of a wall, I would expect a lot of gray matter basically everywhere. So, you know, like, because it would hit the wall, but then would also slide, bounce. Like, there's, you know, it wouldn't be a neat, here's a artistic, you know, symmetrical blood spray up the wall. Like, it would be a fucking mess behind that couch. But again, like, that is one of those details that I'm like, it doesn't really ruin the story. It's just one of those things that, you know, doesn't look quite right if you are used to violence and considering violence.
Yeah, they didn't get that part right. Is it important for everybody? No, because most folks actually haven't seen that. So I kind of went. My thought was, fucking Hollywood. Okay, I'm over it. Let's get past it. But you were asking me to reflect on technical accuracies. Doesn't look like that.
Yeah, yeah. No. The comment is welcome, Mike.
His degree of anger was, and so at this point, his paranoia kicks off, right? And that's super important for the story. And that's not without basis in reality, I think. I could sympathize with the character as written, and that his memory is no longer reliable. Now becomes super important, because how do you convince people there's bad shit happening if you're manifestly not altogether present and correct, right? Yeah. And then that becomes a nightmare. And that's super important for what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, to point out a technical detail that is not military, Mona Lisa actually gave me this one. She points out that it looks like the magnet in the MRI has not been turned off. Right, to keep along with the narrative. He's going to his medical appointment because he realizes his memory is funky, and he's so fucked up that even he's like, okay, yeah, I got to go get checked out. He finally, to his wife's relief, he goes to his medical appointment. He's in the MRI machine, which, Mike, I'm sure you've had a few MRIs. I know I'm a repeating customer. And you know, that magnet is no bullshit, you know, like in the MRI, you do not wear metal in there. You don't take anything metal in there because it will rip it. Like, there are stories of people who somehow in the early days of MRIs did have like something in their pocket and it gets ripped through their skin to the magnet in the MRI.
Or Eastern European steel amalgam dentures.
Yep.
Or mouth hardware. It will flat out take them out. It's just,
yeah, it's way too powerful. So, like, she pointed out, it doesn't look like the magnet's off. So when they come in with guns and knives, it's like, like, that magnet had to be turned off first, you know, like, before they did that.
What is the range of the field effect of an active MRI machine?
I don't know, but according to her, you do not want to take metal in the room, the same room as the machine, period. Like,
I thought that was going to be a thing. I thought they were going to use the magnet to like be like part of the fight.
And I wonder if maybe they were thinking...
running. MRIs are super loud. They're really, really loud.
Yeah.
Was the machine running? Because remember, the shooters enter through the control room and kill the doctors.
Yeah.
Does that explain why the MRI is now turned off and he can move around?
I mean, maybe. Like, and again, I don't know what the indicators are or not, but it's something she caught that she was like, I don't know if that was like, if the magnet was still functional, you know, that I don't know if that would work. I don't know all the details, but it was just interesting to me that she pointed that out. I liked, from a Hollywood standpoint, the fight in the MRI room, because while I don't know how realistic it is in total, one of the things that happens in close quarters combat in movies so much is they'll often like take a pause to say something, or, you know, do something dramatic or anything like that. And like, they just fought until the two guys were dead. And I appreciate that, because that's my like minimum bar for me enjoying that kind of fight is don't stop for the quip. Don't, like do the next logical thing to survive. And I think that when he wraps his hand, because I'm not a knife fighter, but then the basic training I've had in knives is it's not if you get cut, it's how much you get cut. So anything you have that stops or slows the blade is useful. So if all you've got is a hospital gown, you would wrap it around one arm to have that option. Mike, I'll let you go into more detail on that one. It annoyed me that they got up close to his head with the pistol, when I'm like, the whole point of a gun is not getting right next to someone. But then I'm like, oh, right, they're trying to make it look like a self-inflicted wound. So maybe they do have a reason to want to get the pistol closer. Although putting it within it, that's a trade-off. It's like, yeah, it's a more credible story, but you put a gun where he could reach it, and action is faster than reaction. He really theoretically could have survived that, although it's a long shot. But yeah, Mike, I'll let you comment a little bit more on the fight before we get to closing thoughts.
I mean, it was, as fights go, that was a really long fight. It doesn't take anything like that long to inflict a sufficiently incapacitating wound, even when you're open hand, right?
Yeah.
So, but and they absorbed an absurd amount of punishment. You get punched in the kidney, you're not moving for a little bit. You're frozen for half a second, 3/4 of a second. And half a second is forever in EQC. So ECQC, extreme close quarter combat battle, right? It is super violent and it happens really fast. The biggest artificiality of ECQC courses is that you're not supposed to inflict legitimate lethal or permanent incapacitating damage. So they end up being in these like 3 and 4 minute wrestle matches where both guys roll away going, like, they can't get their breath. So none of these guys are breathing hard. That's the first thing that's wrong. And the second thing that I didn't buy is that, again, Chris Pratt is absorbing damage and not really reacting to it, his character. What I love is the first time that we see his character do it, and it's completely legitimate and 100% on point and accurate, is he delivers something called security rounds. The bad guy's down and not moving or barely moving, and the first thing he does is make sure the bad guy doesn't get up. And you do that by putting one through the guy's brain housing group. 100% real.
Yep.
I've known and have been in firsthand instances where we delivered security rounds to people that were down and dead already because they weren't the bodies weren't responding to verbal commands. I'm not gonna turn my back on that. So you drill them through the head, and then if it becomes a permissive environment, among the first people behind you are the fucking lawyers to see what happened, and they go, well, these bodies are clearly have gunshots post-mortem. Why are you desecrating bodies? I'm not desecrating a body, jackass. It's called security rounds. Mm-hmm. Now that's probably a little more accepted, but back in the day it wasn't. But it was definitely trained, and he does it like he's like as easy as breathing. 100% legit. Love the detail.
Yeah. All right. So Mike and I have obviously done a lot of talking because this is a military show. But Sam, I want to give you first because we are going. Oh, and then obviously he returns back, and like Mike said, he spots that it's his pistol that's been taken from his house, so he knows there's something wrong at home. And I will say, like, I read the book, so I knew it was going to happen. But I'll let Sam talk first, then Mike. Did you know, based off of previews and the episode so far, did you know his family was dying? I think it was pretty, I think if you're familiar with this kind of story, you've read some Punisher comic books maybe, you know where this is going. You know, you don't want to get too attached to the wife and the kid. Go ahead.
I didn't think it was going to happen that fast. I didn't think it was going to happen about the end of the first episode. Gotcha. I thought that I knew that it was going to happen, and I thought that there'd be more of a memory thing, like when were they alive, when were they not alive, and there wasn't that. But I didn't think it was going to happen so fast. That surprised me. And at that point, I'm like, and into the second episode, I'll just say, I'm like, oh, this guy's in trouble because the case against him is going to be real strong. And like, I don't know if he's going to be like, he leaves the bodies there, But if there's a conspiracy, you know, those bodies are going to get moved. They're going to take care of that. So I'm like, this guy, and he's like on the scene with his wife and kid with a gun. It's like, doesn't look good for Reese, man. Doesn't look good for Reese at the end of the first episode.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then Mike, just on the setup, I imagine you were like me. You knew that they were not long for this world and this kind of story.
No, I knew it was a revenge story, which kind of, to a point, his relationship, especially with his daughter, is a key character quality that then informs his later decisions. A couple times important. I'm trying to recall how much detail they showed in the death scene. Because one of the rules of writing and filmmaking is you got to be really careful on how you portray the death of children and innocence, right? And it's possible to really turn your audience off. So, if anything, they significantly softened that plot point.
I think you just see their feet, if I'm not mistaken. You don't even see their full dead bodies, which I approve of that.
You see blood and you see the feet.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that because I don't need to see that or think about it.
Yeah.
So for the purposes of the entertainment component, that's fine. But the impact to his character, if anything, was understated, I think.
I think that
later, and I'm not going to give it away. There's a subsequent event in the series where he makes a questionable tactical decision. And then they're like, that's bad. He's like, and he explains why he does it. And it's based on a detail in the scene, which is not shown to the viewer in the scene, which I think there's probably a way they could have done it, because that ends up being a plot point that explains some of his behavior, which is absolutely like understandable, but tactically a really bad idea. And he does that repeatedly, making bad tactical calls to achieve a personal aim that's tied to this specific moment in the series that crystallizes his determination for revenge. And not just any old revenge, very personal, drawn out revenge, if you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they lead that scene sufficiently because they're trying to deal with okay, how much are we going to show a dead wife and daughter? I mean, how much do you really want to show?
Yeah, because people have to be able to keep going.
When we get to those episodes, I'll talk about it more.
Mm-hmm.
I see why they did it. I mean, they have to stop at a hard R. Okay, got it. But the storyteller in me, I didn't read the book. Maybe you can tell us. The storyteller.
It's very clear in the book. It's very clear in the book, and you can do it in the book. Because you don't have a human body on the floor. It's just in your imagination. You can do a lot of shit in the book you can't do in a TV series or a movie, right? Yeah. You know, you can depict all kinds of things that you would never put on a movie or TV. But in the book, it sufficiently goes into the detail that Lauren has shielded their daughter with her body from the assailants, and that fucks with him. Like, it's what you would expect, of course, from any parent. But like,
unsuccessfully shielded her.
Yeah, unsuccessfully shielded her kid. Also, in the book, she gets a shot off or two and wounds one of the assailants because, you know, as it so happens, our wives know how to use guns and they are armed. And my wife is nearly as good a shot as I am. So I'd expect a body or two if this happened. But yeah, no, in the book, it is they at the moment. They focus on that when he's discovering their bodies.
Yeah, it's a critical motivator for the characters, not just his decisions, but
his errors.
He puts on it.
Yeah. So anyway, so I think that's good for that. So again, final thoughts before we wrap up and do the outros. Sam, we're at the end of season 1. What has stood out to you? What do you love? Episode 1. Sorry, I feel like season 1. This is the longest episode I've recorded to date because I have, like, you know, Mike is a fucking fountain of information. Sam, what are you? I mean it. It's a compliment. Shut up, Sam.
My wife would agree with you about the fountain part.
Yeah, my wife would just be relieved it's not me talking incessantly. So thank you, Sam. We're at the end of the show. What do you love? What's off-putting you, and what are you excited about as we go at this point going forward?
At that point, nothing's off-putting me. Enjoying it. I'm a little confused by everything that's going on, but that gets cleared up pretty quickly within the second episode. I feel like it really hits the ground running. So I would say, if you're not 100% on board with episode 1, just watch episode 2, and it clears it up a little bit more. And like, I enjoyed episode 2 and 3 more than I enjoyed episode 1. But I do like Chris Pratt. I think he's a good actor. I think he's likable. I like, other people might disagree with that, and you mentioned that earlier. People complaining. I don't read reviews, so I don't deal with that shit. But I like him. I like the action was good. It didn't like confuse me or anything. I didn't give it as much thought as you guys do, but I appreciate it. It was a good start. I think enjoyability factor. I would compare it, because like there's a bunch of shows. I compare Jack Reacher. I thought was really just a more enjoyable show. It's just a fun time. It's not like a revenge story. So like, if you're just looking for like a good fun time, I would go that way. I think this is better than Jack Ryan, that I think Amazon also did. I think it's infinitely better than Jack Ryan, but that's it just feels like, more real and just like a better story, just better shit. So and so keep going. If you're into 1, watch 2, and I'm gonna keep watching it tonight. So
awesome.
See where it goes.
Awesome. All right, Mike, go ahead. Final thoughts.
I'm in agreement with Sam. Of all of the episodes, this is the weakest, and it's still fair. It's still strong enough that I watched the next one, which I have walked away from acclaimed series after half an episode. Like, what? No, I only have so much time on this planet. I'm not spending it on that. Yep. This episode did what it had to do, which is get me to watch the second episode, which is much stronger. I liked Chris Pratt as an actor. I also like his character. I like that he's not yucking it up. Chris Pratt doesn't have to be the Parks and Rec funny man. He can be somebody else. And that's there are other actors that have successfully gone from their traditional typecast role and had a more serious, credible role. I didn't take Leonardo DiCaprio seriously as an actor for a very long time.
Hold on, I bet I know what you're going to say. Go ahead.
And then I watched Catch Me If You Can.
Okay.
With Tom Hanks, where he didn't yuck it up. He wasn't a love interest. It was all about relationships and how he felt about himself. And I'm like, holy shit, the guy can act. All right, okay, I'll take him seriously. So I think Chris Pratt has been unhelpfully typecast. I'm sure he's made a whole bunch of money, but between Jurassic Park and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, boy, he's locked into a series of roles, right?
No, you're not wrong.
This differentiates him successfully.
Yeah, he has a lot more range now.
Yeah.
This episode did what it had to do. I'm looking forward to our chats for the subsequent ones, because they're actually more interesting. And actually, there's less. A lot of them have a lot less military detail and more character development. So it'll be a different kind of conversation for some of them.
Yeah. No, I agree with both of you. Obviously, I come into it a little differently, having read the books. I will say that the changes they make are every change they made from the book so far, and I think it's pretty true throughout the series, but we'll go episode by episode, like you said. Every change they made from the book, in my opinion, was either pretty much inevitable because of the limitations of the medium that you don't have when you're just by yourself at your computer. When I can imagine anything I want, zombies can storm the Vatican at my computer. Or they were kind of an improvement, like with the journalist, to make her more of a less of a, oh, I want to be your friend right off the bat, and more of a, I am an independent agent out for myself, and you can't fully trust me, and I can't fully trust you. That makes for better storytelling. So yeah, I'm really excited for episode 2 as well. I really love this series. I'm glad it was made. I'm glad it made it to Amazon without getting completely boned, because I feel like this is something that could have gone horribly wrong and ended up like any one of a dozen direct-to-DVD Navy SEAL movies that are out there. So that we'll close it off. Like I said, this is the longest episode yet, but I think it's great. I think this is a high protein episode. I love it. I'll start with Sam. Talk a little bit about what's going on in the world of Narrow Bridge films. I know we just recorded last night, so this will be a little repetitive, but you've been sweeping up some awards, going to some festivals, having a good time. Go ahead and talk for a little bit about that.
You're now for me, but Tales from the Narrow Bridge is my horror anthology. It's my most recent movie. It's been at some festivals in Jersey. We're going to be at the Bergen International Film Festival in 2 weeks on the 21st of July. And we're excited about that. We've won some, my brother who's in the movie won Best Actor 3 times in a row. We've won some we won Best Feature Film at our last film festival. We won Best Ensemble. So we're doing pretty good. We got what Best Supporting Actor and Actress, one at a different one. So excited about that. We're going to Gen Con in Indiana. If you're in the Midwest, if you're in Indiana, come see it.
So jealous.
We're going on it.
So
I know,
jealous.
I know. But Thursday night of a Gen Con, we're going to be on at like 11 o'clock. We got like a late show. But we're excited about that one, and we're hopeful for more festivals and hopefully some distribution on down the line.
Nice. Awesome. Thanks, Sam. Links to Sam's films and some of his work and his website will be in the liner notes below. Mike, what do you have out most recently? Because Mike is, like me, a science fiction fantasy author, and we publish with some of the same people, mostly the same people, I think, Bain and Chris Kennedy, and you have a couple others going on. But so what's out most recently that people can pick up and read your work, and what's coming out next that you're excited about?
I think the most recent release is the combined 6 short novels, 6 long novellas collection from Chris Kennedy Press of the addendum or extension of Chuck Gannon's Caneverse or Fire with Fire universe, available on Amazon and the usual places. I have just signed a contract for a new short story edited by Casey Zell and Larry Correa, which will be in the Noir Fatale series.
Oh, congrats. And, those anthologies are doing well. Congrats, Mike.
Just signed another contract. This one returning, it'll be my 6th short story, complementing the 2 novels I did with Johnny Ringo in his Black Tide series. That was announced at LibertyCon 34, which we just had last month in June in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And then I've got a couple.
Good time.
Yeah, it was fabulous. We also did No Kidding, There I Was Again. So that was fun. But my 2 novel collaborations are current, and my solo are currently not publicly announced, so I'm not going to discuss them. I've got my website at thegeniuswar.com, but I haven't updated it recently, so no need for folks to go there until I get something new up. And you can follow me on Facebook.
Awesome. So Mike's links will also be in the liner notes below. That is all the time we have for the Lore and Valor podcast at this time. I will hope to see you next time. And until then, keep up the fire.